All right, let's, Josh, why don't we get started? So let me just start by introducing myself. So my name is Prasanth. I've been part of AutoRABIT for the last 8, 9 years now. I've been lucky to be part of the founding team. Before that, I was a Salesforce architect. So I've been in and around the Salesforce space for more than a decade and a half, close to 2 decades now. So yeah, to say, I've seen a lot of Salesforce implementations. I started practicing DevOps probably 12, 13 years ago and learned a lot. And during the course of this webinar, I'd like to sort of give those learnings back to the community, share what works in Salesforce, what doesn't work in Salesforce when it comes to for people managing the DevOps. We're not going to be talking about any kind of scripting or any kind of best practices, but we'll be talking about how do you identify the problems, aka bottlenecks, and how do you start fixing them, measuring them, and sort of have a template that you can take back to your management and your um, you know to the heads of your business and show them what value you're able to bring in through the processes that you guys are putting in. So that's what this webinar is about. That's what I do. Josh, can we hit the next slide, please? All right, perfect. For the agenda, what we'll be covering today is we'll be covering how we got here. When I say here, in the world of DevOps, there are multiple variables, if you will. And when Salesforce DevOps started, we started taking some of the best practices from the traditional world and started applying it to into Salesforce. We learned a bunch that like the traditional Git flow doesn't directly translate to Salesforce. So we'll be breaking down the anatomy of that release flow or the anatomy of the Git flow. We'd be talking about how we can map bottlenecks. We'll be talking about identifying what are the key success criteria or what are the key benchmarks that you guys should be looking at. And I'll give you some examples that you can take away today after this webinar and start implementing in your projects at your enterprises. Next slide, please. All right. So the first and foremost is there's this big saying that you cannot improve what you cannot see, right? So I put this picture of a pyramid, sort of a triangle of because if you cannot see what is on the other side of the pyramid, there's no way for us to understand how we start how we start understanding is that a vertical line directly starting at the top of the pyramid to the bottom that just drops, or is there another angle there, or is there a cat holding up this whole pyramid by a stick? Like, if you cannot see that, you do not know what to improve, what to measure, and what kind of improvement that you can bring in. So by the end of this webinar, what I want to show you is give you methods, mechanisms that you can take back and immediately implement at your enterprise, and also give you some of those benchmarks that you can track as part of your of success criteria. So next slide, please. All right. So next slide, Josh. All right. So when we first started implementing DevOps at Salesforce, we took this. When I say we, I sort of bring in a lot of people into the we. Because when Salesforce DevOps started back in the day, the whole concept of CI or the whole concept of version control did not exist in Salesforce. Chain sets was the way, using the AND tool that Salesforce provided to package and deploy was typically what we used to do. The concept of version control was lost on us, so we started implementing the typical Git flow that you can see on the screen, where you have one main branch, and on that main branch you have a release branch, and then from that release branch you create a feature branch. Now, one of the challenges that we've come to realize is that the Salesforce code base is this huge bunch chunk of XML files, and there's not actually any there's minimal code in it with Apex or Visual Force. So uh, we were heavily dependent on how these XML files translated uh, to the version control and from the version control to Salesforce. Meaning, if you had like a large object file, and if you try to deploy that large object file, or if you tried to collaborate on that large object file between two developers, you would always come up, you would always end up with changing the structure of the file, where you take one line. Um, uh, and take you mess up the sequence of the lines, or what's called marshalling or unmarshalling in the world of XML, and that would pretty much break the Salesforce deployment. So what we then decided was, this is probably not a great way for Salesforce community to start using Git flow, because Git flow works in the traditional world but doesn't actually work in the world of Salesforce. So we pivoted from this, and we started understanding that just having the view of the branching is not enough in Salesforce. Let me say that again. Just having the view of the branching is not enough for Salesforce. So what works in Salesforce? So let's come to that. So Josh, can we have the next slide, please? Then this is what we eventually got to. This was like a step up to the typical Git flow, where we said that, okay, we are now, the whole concept of sandboxes comes in Salesforce. There's like four different types of sandboxes, from dev pro, full copy, partial copy sandboxes. How do you, and then there's this production org. How do you map those sandboxes to your Git flow? And then we came up with this rudimentary picture where we said that, okay, so here we are saying that every dev org is associated with a Git branch, and that Git branch, and as code moves forward, that particular Git branch, we are able to identify the deltas in the code using the going back to what I was saying, the XML files. We were able to identify the change footprint on those XML files using the tools provided by version control, where we are able to compare two revision numbers and exactly find out the lines that changed. And then using the object structure or the schema available from Salesforce, we were able to sort of convert those delta files into something that can be deployed into Salesforce. So long story short, we said that we found that this is a better way for the Salesforce community to represent their release flow, where we are able to put in the Salesforce org and the Git in the same picture. But this was also not sort of enough, because this was not showing us what is the process that goes behind each of those arrows, or behind each of those sandbox. Now, if you zoom into this, Josh, can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. So if you zoom into this, there is a whole other world that is hiding in plain sight behind that picture. So there is the whole SDLC, where when it comes to the planning, who is defining what will be changed, what fields are getting added, what layouts getting changed, what workflows are getting added, what validation rules are getting moved, what Visual Force components are getting designed, and so on and so forth. So that part of it was invisible to the flow that we had on the screen a little while ago, because the entire SDLC, where the people and process live, are completely invisible in that other picture. So we found out that as practitioners, we would have to start talking about the process, what people adopt in the background, behind Git and behind Salesforce, to articulate what challenges come across in developing Salesforce code. So uh, until we were not able to sort of pinpoint and say that, okay, when a sprint starts, Person A is going to write this user story. Person B is going to be responsible for approving that user story. Person C would start going in and writing code. Person D would approve that code. So we didn't have all of that sort of visually represented in the Git flow or the release flow. So we found a better way to do that, and that's what we'll be coming to in a second. So Josh, can we have the next slide, please? So what we found is the best way to represent uh, the SDLC and the Git flow is using this sort of a mechanism where you're having three main swim lanes. One is the flow of code on which represents where your code starts and the environments, the version control branches. The second one is the SDLC associated with the flow of code. When you say that you're committing something into the version control, where does the process start, right? Like who are the people involved in it? And the third swim lane is what are the challenges that you face when you try to implement that flow of code or try to implement the process for that flow of code. So let me show you an example of how this looks like from a real customer use case. So this is what we want to give you as part of this webinar. This template is going to incredibly help you in sort of drawing out how your current state of things are at your enterprise, from planning to production. Who are the people involved? What are the problems that you face, so that you can have one visualization which you can take back to your teams, to your management, and show them that here are the places where we are having the problems. Here are the places we will have to invest time, money, attention. And here are and if you're able to solve these XYZ bottlenecks, you'll be able to go much faster. There's more value at the end of the tunnel. So Josh, let's show the crowd a real implementation of this picture. Perfect, thank you. So I don't know if you guys are able to sort of zoom into this. What you're able to see here is on the top, you have your typical Git flow. The typical Git flow is where you have your sandboxes. The sandboxes connect to a version control system, and from those version control system, you move code forward uh, uh, to uh, to your QA, to your integration sandbox, to your QA sandbox, and finally to production. And if you see, we are mapping that flow of code to the process. The process there is, you can see that who is creating the user story, who, when the users, at what stage of the user story are you going to be building the actual code behind it? Who's going to approve it? And so on and so forth. And on the bottom, you're able to see what are the different bottlenecks that come in. Now, just to call out some of the bottlenecks that this particular customer had, was during the development phase for this particular customer, they did not have a security testing in place. They did not have a feature branch integration. They did not have a merge resolution system, right? So what we basically what this visualization did for us, and when we as practitioners and implementations of our software went to our customers and said that this is how your current state of things are, here's how you're able to move your code from left to right, here's the process, here are the people that are involved, and here's the bottlenecks that you're able to that you're facing in this piece of implementation. Our customers were able to understand this in a rather better way, where they're able to immediately put a finger on exactly the problems that they were having, and just to say that our life got easier in order to communicate the problems that customers, a customer or the team is having, the team on the ground is having, because of the way things are set up. It made us easy for us to sort of help them solve the bottlenecks, because now we are able to see those bottlenecks using this picture. So to rewind, you will not be able to improve what you cannot see. And in order to see the whole SDLC, you need a better visualization. And in order to get to that better visualization, you need a picture that can show you the flow of code, how your code, your environments, your version control systems. A second aspect of that is what are the people and the process involved, and the third aspect of that is in that in those environments, in those version control systems, in those process, in those people, what are the different challenges that that your team is facing. So this, gentlemen, ladies, is our take on a release flow mapping, if you will, which predominantly helps you as practitioners to communicate your current state of Salesforce to your management, to your customers, and so on and so forth. So once you've identified the bottlenecks, what do you do with them? So one is you can go back to your engineering team or to the team on the ground and say that, hey, for example, you do not have a security testing in place. Now, I don't know if you guys are following the news, but a major issue happened in the last couple of weeks where one of the predominant open source systems called Polyfill, which is a CDN network, sold their software to a Chinese entity, and that Chinese entity started introducing malware. Now, Polyfill is something that I'm pretty sure everybody uses this. This is like um, um, this is a piece of software, a piece of JavaScript that is used by developers to support when you're creating an application. It is used by developers to support older versions of browsers. For example, if you're on Chrome and you want to support IE11, you would probably use a polyfill system in order to sort of backtrack and move your content. Now, what Polyfill and the developers of Polyfill did was they sold their software to a Chinese entity, and that Chinese entity started introducing malware, which basically has compromised hundreds and thousands of websites. So all the security softwares in the world um, have started implementing scans rules to catch the polyfill implementations. And if you just do a simple Google, you'll find out that polyfill is extensively used in LWC, or it is used in Visualforce pages, because we run Salesforce on the browser, and sometimes it is necessary for the browser to sort of support older versions of the browser. So long story short, if you do not have a security testing in place at a development stage, then you would not catch the issue with polyfill and end up with a malware in your production system. So um, that is a bottleneck that you can see thanks to this picture. Now, you're able to communicate to your team that, with polyfill, without polyfill. Polyfill is an example, but the main point is that as a team, you can all look at this picture every once in a week or every once in a sprint and say that this is the current state of our things. These are our bottlenecks. How do we go about solve each bottlenecks one at a time so that we don't end up in the news? So I hope you're able to take this back, take the concept back to your teams and start implementing this so that it gives you a good visualization of the current state of your things. Josh, can we move to the next slide, please? Cool. So when out of the hundreds and thousands of implementations that our company did, or of what I was part of, some of the core challenges that we always ended up are what I try to make a word cloud out of this to sort of because it was impossible to sort of get everything into one place. So these are some of the common challenges that we faced whenever we implement Salesforce DevOps at a large enterprise. One of the major challenges being code merging, compliance checks, after post-deployment verification, where you deploy something to production, then you have to check the audit log um, to see if the software got the layout or page or field that you're trying to deploy, if it did get deployed in the right way, manner, or form. How do you deal with hot fixes? How do you deal with code reviews? How do you deal with pre and post deployment steps? How do you deal with training, documentation, and so on and so forth? So these are some of the bottlenecks that we face. Josh, if you can go back one slide, please. So uh, So the bottom red part that you're able to see on the screen, this is where these bottlenecks lie. So what we have done for our customers is when we spend time with them, we are able to figure out that the word cloud that you just saw, those are the bottlenecks that typically happen in a Salesforce practice. So as part of this webinar, we'd be giving you this particular template and those sample bottlenecks that you can take back and have a conversation with your team if you're having these challenges. For example, something as simple as code merging. Now developers are the are next to patients, right? Like they are very patient when it comes to merging code, because they will not tell anyone that they're having a problem in merging code. They just want to see their work function in production. But as managers or as practitioners, it would be our responsibility to sort of help them avoid merge conflicts. Now, merging is part of it's part of life, right? Like you cannot get away from it. But how do you decrease the merge conflicts? That's what we can help uh, developers adapt a system where merge conflicts can typically be brought down to zero. For example, after every sprint, if you're able to baseline your production systems and baseline your version control with your production system, you'd be bringing down merge conflicts by a factor of at least two. So these are some of the practices. I mean, we can keep talking about this, but the intent of this particular webinar is to give you the tools, give you the mechanisms in which you can have conversations with your team. So the first step of that is to have this picture that encapsulates your Salesforce systems, your version control systems, your SDLC process, and the challenges. Right. So one picture that can paint a that can that can show you how your current state of things are. And Josh, can you give me the next slide, please? And this common bottlenecks, and I'm 90% sure that most of what these bottlenecks would be a reality in most enterprises, because that's what Salesforce brings to the table. It is very easy to build software on Salesforce, but it is extremely hard to maintain version software on Salesforce. So that's what these bottlenecks attribute to. Josh, can you have the next slide, please? So in order to improve, you need to know what the bottlenecks are. And you need to have like I was saying, you need to have a conversation with your team to understand what those bottlenecks are and at what stage of your SDLC those bottlenecks are coming in. And you basically have to care about your team enough to make it better. Now, if in Salesforce, at the end of the day, what the Salesforce admins and developers go through on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is basically hidden under the carpet, usually hidden on the carpet when it comes to business users who come back and log into the system on a Monday. So it is our job to care for that team and have conversations with our team to identify what are the challenges that they're facing and how do we bring in the right process, the right tools, the right technology in order to improve their lives. So yeah, you need to care in order to fix. So Josh, can we have the next slide, please? All right, cool. So since we've started identifying, we start with a system of how you can identify the bottlenecks, what an example of what those bottlenecks are. How do you start fixing them? What does good look like when it comes to benchmarks? What do you measure and how do you measure and how much should you measure? So this is what we'll be talking about in the next part of the session. So Josh, can you give me the next slide, please? So what you see here are some of the key benchmarks. Like I said, as part of this webinar, we want to give you the tools that you can take back to your enterprise. So these are some of the benchmarks that we implement. We, as a top Salesforce DevOps company, implement at our customers to identify what does good look like. For example, take defect density. How many defects should be allowed as part of 100 lines of code? So what we realized is that good benchmark to follow here is less than 1 per 1,000 lines. So if you are having 1,000 Apex classes running about 100,000 lines. How many issues can you have in those in those Apex lines? Probably about one per 1,000 lines. This is sort of the target value that we realize is a good benchmark for an enterprise. Take security hotspots. How many you should have in your software? Well, pretty evident that you should not have any zero. You should not have any critical hotspots in your key software. I mean, hotspots come in different categories. You have critical, you have major, minor. So you can have minor, you can have major, but you should not have any kind of critical hotspots. Technical debt, it's a big challenge in Salesforce. Yeah, how much you should have? We found out that it should be less than 10% of your development time. And we also sort of recommend teams to sort of start implementing this practice where they can uh, spend at least one story point on reducing technical debt every sprint, right? So if you spend one story point on reducing technical debt every sprint, by the end of like 3 months or 6 months, you probably get your technical debt to less than 10%. How frequently should you deploy? You should at least have two deployments per sprint to at least one deployment validation where you're sending your code to production and keeping it there without consumption. Um, or, and the second one is to actually deploy the code. So it is, we recommend that you constantly validate what you want to deploy on production, because on the day of the production deployment, you do not want to be stuck with a failing Apex class or a failing layout or a failing profile. Um, some other metrics that you can follow are, what kind of success that you're having when you release to Salesforce. How long, what is the time that is spent by your teams when you have to release software to Salesforce? This is another metric that gives you a good indication of the time that your teams are spending on making Salesforce work. But lastly, not the least, how much time are you spending in terms of effectively managing the profiles and permission sets? Now, Salesforce um, uh, has rolled out uh, this news that they'd be going away with profiles. They've backtracked on that now, but they'd be moving away from profiles eventually. So how do you go about changing all of your profiles to permission set? What does that look like for your teams? So that pretty much is what we wanted to communicate through this webinar. So one is a picture that you can take back to your teams to visualize your Salesforce environments, your version control systems, your people, your process, and the challenges that they're having. Two, once you're having your bottlenecks in place, once you've identified your bottlenecks, how do you go about putting metrics behind those bottlenecks so that you can start measuring them? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you some time back, but I hope this webinar gives you the tools that you require to succeed in your business or in your enterprise. If there are any questions, I would love to take them. If not, the recording would be available for you guys to take these tools and sort of implement in your companies. Josh, do we have any questions?
It doesn't look like it.
All right. Very good. So we'll make this recording available. Like I said, these benchmarks and the visualization are incredible tools to help you paint a picture for your management, for your company in terms of the time that your teams are spending on making Salesforce work. And I hope that you found this helpful. Thank you very much for attending. See you next time.